Good morning. Welcome. We are talking to Danya Falkson today. She's a registered dietitian. So welcome to Fertility Talk. Our topic today is nutrition and endometriosis, and how does your nutrition impact endometriosis? So thank you very much, Danya, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to do this talk.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So if you could just tell everybody who you are, what it is that you do.
So, yeah, my name is Danya. I'm a registered dietitian, and also I specialize in nutrition for fertility and pregnancy. So that, covers all your fertility-related conditions such as PCOS, endometriosis, as well as managing and helping along the process different fertility treatments and trying to conceive naturally and managing pregnancy once pregnant. And I really love this area of nutrition. It's so interesting, and the effects that nutrition can have on fertility is just, yeah, really, really powerful.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for that.
Must I just tell you if I need a cough?
Yeah, so our first question is, thank you for that, Danya. Our first question is, what role does inflammation play in both endometriosis and fertility? And how can diet modulate inflammation levels to improve outcome? So, yeah.
So I'll get right to it. Sorry, there's a bit of noise in the back. I hope it's not...
We can't hear it, so don't worry.
Okay. So it's an interesting question. So endometriosis is quite unique in the sense that it is a reproductive condition and a fertility related condition, but it's actually at its core a chronic inflammation. It's a chronic inflammatory disorder. When we look at actually the root cause of endometriosis, we see a lot of inflammation and something called oxidative stress, which is essentially the burden on the body of stress from internal and external processes and factors. And those things do work together to sort of cause all the symptoms, the pain, sometimes the infertility, and the other undesirable symptoms of endometriosis. So it's quite unique in the sense that at its core, it's rooted in inflammation. Yeah. So when we look at how we can address it with diet, it's unique in the sense that we know other conditions where, diet has been helped to reduce inflammation, such as, arthritis and heart disease. But we want to focus on viewing endometriosis as inflammation at its core. And while, there's lots that can be done to regulate hormones and, treat your other fertility-related conditions, such as ovulation and egg quality, at its core, it is inflammation. So there is much to do there, but it's almost like we have to shift that perspective as to how to treat it and view it.
Okay, perfect. And then our next question is, how does diet impact the severity of endometriosis symptoms, such as pain and inflammation?
So the interesting thing about endometriosis is it's very unique to various people, and it's quite underdiagnosed because the symptoms also vary. So you've got, your terrible menstrual pain, you've got your infertility, but you also have things like poor gut health, bloating. Often we have endometriosis and IBS together. There's lots of different symptoms of what it could be. So when we look at how diet can address it, we first need to look at what are the specific symptoms for individuals. And then we can focus, okay, well, where is the inflammation? Where is the problem? How can we mitigate the stress? So as an example, someone with pain, with quite bad like general pain and menstrual pain, studies have found that like a supplementing vitamin C and vitamin E can help reduce that pain. While we know vitamin C and vitamin E are antioxidants, so that reduces that oxidative stress in the body. And so studies have found that supplementing those foods are very helpful, supplementing that nutrient. But we also, want to look at it more from a dietary perspective, foods in the diet rich in vitamin C, for example, for someone with a lot of pain. We can also look at other things like, managing fiber intake, especially for someone who's got quite bad like IBS symptoms, bloating, discomfort and bad gut health. So the way we'll go, while we focus mainly and generally as anti-inflammatory, specific symptoms will also lead us to which sort of, I wouldn't want to say diet specifically, which implies, limiting foods and cutting things out, but patterns of eating and styles of eating and, sort of making sure that there isn't going to be one nutrient that fixes everything, but making sure that we've got a group of things that are going to work together to reduce pain or improve gut health specific to the person.
Okay, perfect. Then our next question are there specific foods or dietary patterns that can worsen the endometriosis symptoms? And if so, which ones should we avoid? Which one should be avoided?
So that's a great question as well. It's not about only what we do eat, but it's what we don't eat. So coming back to inflammation, I'm going to come back to it. We have the foods that we know are anti-inflammatory, like I've mentioned, like vitamin C, for example. The foods that we generally know that are bad for us because they cause inflammation in the body are the same foods that are going to also trigger endometriosis. So your big one is your trans fats. So we have your healthy fats like omega-3, which is going to reduce inflammation. And then we have trans fats, which is going to increase inflammation. So that's fried foods, things made with very high processed oils and fats, baked goods, all your essentially your junk foods and your crisps. Those foods, the trans fat foods, are going to be your biggest enemy with endometriosis in terms of management, but also prevention. Another big one, which is alcohol. So again, we know that in sometimes alcohol does have health benefits in certain amounts for certain conditions, but as a general rule, especially having quite a few drinks at one time, they can cause a lot of inflammation. It's essentially a toxin that you bring into the body and which is adding to that stress that's already in the body. So I would say, even if one isn't trying to fall pregnant, where, we don't want to be drinking alcohol, reducing alcohol intake, I'm not going to say it's nothing, but to quite a moderate amount, maybe once a week, having half a glass of wine, and not overdoing it. Alcohol is going to be a big trigger.
Yeah.
And last but not least, it has its place. So I'm not going to say it's the same level of sort of problematic as alcohol and trans fats, but we do want to moderate our red meat intake. Similar guidelines like to the Mediterranean diet, try having it 3 times a week, but not more than that. There is an acid in red meat called palmitic acid, which has been linked to endometriosis. But more than that, our cured meats, ham and sausages and, all those polony things, anything that's been highly processed, lots of chemicals added, probably a lot of oils added, are all going to contribute to inflammation in the body. So again, you know, we don't have to completely reduce it to nothing in the diet, but to really be mindful of how often we are consuming these foods.
Okay, thank you. And then the next one is, can certain nutrients or dietary supplements alleviate symptoms of endometriosis or improve fertility in individuals with the condition?
Right. So yeah, again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. It is going to come back down to individual symptoms, individual what your eating habits are like.
Yeah.
We can almost see, you know, when we look at an in-depth recall of what someone's eating, we can almost pinpoint, okay, you know, you're not getting enough of that, you're not getting enough of that. But yeah, so first of all, we're going to look at the individual things. As I mentioned already, we have, you know, foods that are high in vitamin C, such as your citrus fruits and your berries and all your antioxidants. That's really going to be beneficial. Another thing that is often overlooked is vitamin D. So it could be quite a good thing to, not too regularly, but every once in a while, get one's vitamin D levels checked via blood test. And just to make sure that we're getting adequate vitamin D from the sun, for example, which is our best source of vitamin D. But if that's not adequate, making sure we're supplementing there. Vitamin D is quite a big one, especially because it is part of the hormonal pathways in the body. We also, like I mentioned, healthy fats.
Yeah.
Again, so whether or not that be having oily fish twice a week, or avocado or nuts, you know, every few days, or if that's not possible, to consider an omega-3 supplement, olive oil, and all those sort of healthy fats. There's quite a lot of individual nutrients that have been shown to improve symptoms of endometriosis, but I'd like to emphasize that it's not one nutrient alone that's going to, you know, change everything. Best case scenario, when we incorporate a few healthful really like anti-inflammatory foods, like lots of fruit and vegetables, making sure we're having our healthy fats, lots of fiber, to make sure that we're getting rid of all the hormones, you know, that are metabolized in the body, making sure we're removing toxins from the body. All of those things together have an incredibly cumulative effect that's going to be much more powerful than any individual nutrient. So that's why I'd like to, I know that's going to be, I think, another question probably, that rather changing our mindset to be more of a pattern of eating or a style of eating, rather than a diet where, you know, it's all carb or no meat or anything. There is quite a, I'd like to look more like a pattern of eating.
Okay, thank you. And then our last question for you is, are there any evidence-based dietary strategies or lifestyle modifications that can support hormone balance and reproductive health in individuals with endometriosis?
So I knew this question was coming. In terms of lifestyle, like what we can look at alongside good patterns of eating is things that are going to reduce stress in the body, which, as we mentioned, is a big factor. So first and foremost is actual stress, you know, trying to reduce the actual stress that, you know, we absorb and bring into the body from our environment, whether or not it's from work or family, and how the body deals with that stress, which is making sure we're getting enough sleep, exercising, not over-exercising, but all those natural mechanisms in the body that to manage those stress levels. Drinking lots of water, helping the body remove those toxins. So like I mentioned before, lots of fiber, making sure that we have a healthy gut, and drinking lots of water. Aside from that, Again, I think I'm repeating myself. Looking at anti-inflammatory styles of eating. So the most similar would be the Mediterranean diet, which is lots of fruit and vegetables, low in red meat, lots of healthy fish, whole grains. Yeah, generally foods that would be grouped into that sort of style of eating, the Mediterranean diet. In terms of more specific issues, like I mentioned before, you know, some people with endometriosis do have IBS and bloating and gut health, and that may need more sort of detailed intervention, perhaps looking at trying to see if there's a trigger, an intolerance, or an allergy somewhere. I wouldn't say that that's a first line, you know, to cut out anything like gluten or dairy. They both have really, really important roles in managing endometriosis. Specifically, dairy, you know, is very rich in calcium. But if one of someone's symptoms are very gut related, really, really struggle with bloating and IBS, it could be something else to look at, you know, whether or not to try and eliminate things. But for the most part, I think that anti-inflammatory and mitigating stress in the body would be best.
Okay, you've actually, it's not part of my questions, but something that I'm hearing what you're saying is, I'm hearing stress a lot. So are you saying that, you know, because of almost I want to say the world we live in these days, we've got more and more stress constantly. If you like look at 20 years ago.
Did you cut out for a second?
Sorry. So I'm saying if you look at 20 years ago, there wasn't that much stress, but I think in the world that we live in today, there's so much more stress. So are you saying you are seeing more patients with endometriosis, as if the endometriosis is flaring up more in patients because of this?
So I think that it's multiple factors. So when we refer to stress, there's obviously the external stress. Mental, emotional. We also know that like the gut is very linked to endometriosis, and the gut is like a second brain. So a lot of our emotional health does sort of translate into our gut health as well. From that side, but from the other side as well, when we look at what we're putting in our bodies, you know, we take a lot of medicine, our food's a lot more processed than it used to be. We also are exposed to a lot more chemicals. I didn't mention this before, actually, I forgot. But in terms of things that can worsen symptoms, things like pesticides and BPA plastics, all of those toxins add a lot of stress on the body, and we never used to be exposed to quite this much. And we almost now have to go out of our way to make sure that we're not exposed. You know, washing your fruit and vegetables really, really well, making sure we're choosing the right containers for foods, and going out of way to try to choose foods that are whole and unprocessed. It's a combination, and like I said before, our body's natural way of dealing with stress in the world, and it is a very stressful world at the moment, is through diet, through exercise, through sleeping. And often those things we don't have, you know, we don't prioritize them. Sitting on our phone, and, you know, all of our schedules are out of whack. So there's quite a few factors that would add to stress: internal, external, emotional, physical. And it's a challenge, but it is an important thing to focus. In fact, there's a dietitian that I follow in Australia, so she's very informative about endometriosis, and I was watching her one video. She recommended like a type of breathing to help the body relax, meditate, help the body remove stress. And it's it sounds a bit wacky, but remembering to breathe and meditate and let oxygen into the body and help the body to deal with the stress can be very, very beneficial.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Danya. It's very informative. So I just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out to do this talk. We really, really appreciate it. And
Thank you for
yeah,
having me.
it's a pleasure. Have a great day, and we chat to you soon.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Bye.